the Islamic State heartland in Iraq and Syria now imploding, the terror group is spreading its franchise into South Asia. 3 different attacks in various parts of South Asia, making one thing clear: the manifestation of the ISIS threat is becoming more prominent in this region than in other parts of the Asia-Pacific. First, a shrine attack in Pakistan, more than 100 people killed. In another attack in July in Bangladesh, ISIS fighters massacred 20 people in a Dhaka cafe. And third, the very latest, an ID blast in a train in Ujjain in the state of Madhya Pradesh led to a terror operation on the outskirts of Lucknow, wherein the security forces killed 1 IS terrorist and also nabbed others from Kanpur in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Now, Bangladesh has been on high alert since a cafe attack last July claimed by Islamic State killed at least 20 civilians. That attack was the first of its kind on Bangladeshi soil, raising alarm about State's penetration in this region. WION's Bangladesh Bureau Chief Saad Hammadi sent us this report.
Since the July attack on a cafe in Dhaka, the dynamics of militant attacks in Bangladesh have changed. Earlier they targeted individuals, now they aim at mass casualties. Security forces have killed at least 28 suspected militants, including Tamim Chaudhry, who was allegedly the so-called emir of the Islamic State in Bangladesh. The cafe attack, however, revealed the sheer reach of the IS. Video statements were issued by Bangladeshi individuals from Raqqa, affirming their allegiance to the now-deceased IS leader Abu Muhammad al-Adani. Security forces in Bangladesh remain on high alert, but analysts say that the possibility of more such attacks cannot be ruled out.
We have heard repeatedly from the government, and evidence has also been presented to us about groups in Bangladesh who are involved behind casualties. We have heard about Neo-JMB, we have heard about Ansarul Islam and so on. We have to go to the root causes of some of this problem. Issues of youth radicalization. We have to address issues of cyber radicalization. A large majority of our youth are getting radicalized through the internet. So we have to find out how we can counter that. And most importantly, whether it is in the case of countering Bangladesh-based groups such as Neo-JMB, Huji and so on, or it is in the case of India or in Pakistan or other countries, we have to go back to the point of narrative. What we see in South Asia is a lack of a clear narrative on the part of the state and society, countering or providing an alternative narrative to the narrative presented by the extremist organizations. Ultimately, the fight against violent extremism is an ideological and ideational battle. It's a battle of ideas and minds. And whoever wins that battle of ideas and minds will ultimately win this war.
At least 50 individuals, including atheist bloggers, academicians, freethinkers, and religious minorities, have been killed in militant attacks. According to the terror monitoring group Site Intelligence, many of them were claimed by the Islamic State. Investigators in Bangladesh say that the terrorist attacks claimed by the Islamic State are in fact carried out by members of the Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh. Under whichever names the terrorists may operate, security analysts warn that their spread in the region is evident. In Dhaka, this is Saad Hammadi for WION.
All right, let's get on with our discussion on this, on the threat of the Islamic State in the South Asia region. Joining me live from the newsroom is WION's correspondent Daniele Pagani. Also joining me live from Islamabad is Pakistan's Bureau Chief, WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui. Daniele, coming to you first. Now, there are talks how the ISIS is losing ground in Mosul as well as Raqqa and turning its attention to the other region, establishing, determined to enforce its ideology of radical Wahhabi Islam. How much of a threat is IS at present, according to you, in this particular region?
Well, I would like to underline that the Islamic State is always a credible threat. Then we still don't know if the spread of the ideology of the Islamic State is managed by the headquarters in the Middle East or not, because one of the peculiarities of the Islamic State that it works like a brand. So each and every local terror outfit already active in South Asia could easily just pick up the name and the ideology of the Islamic State. And this is why the Islamic Islamic State is very dangerous. It's also very difficult to track a clear line of connection between the center and the, let's call it the regional outfits or the local outfits active far away from the Middle East. So the Islamist threat is definitely a threat, but the biggest threat is the ideology behind it and the possibility that every small little terror outfit can just pick up the name, conduct a terror attack and claim it as an Islamic State attack.
Right. You know, I'm going to come back to you, Daniele, in just a bit. But joining me right now is also Mr. Shafqat Munir, Research Fellow from the Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies. Sir, thanks so much for joining us. First up, how alarming, according to you, is the presence of Islamic State in the South Asian region?
Particularly troubled by the news that 2 attacks in India have been claimed by the so-called Islamic State or ISIS. In this particular case, the claim has been made by ISIS in Khorasan in Afghanistan. This is indeed a very troubling development. This is the first time that an attack has been claimed by the so-called Islamic State within the Indian mainland. So it's a very important development. I'm sure the Indian authorities are looking at it with a tremendous amount of alacrity and seriousness. There is a concern among all South Asian states and also in Southeast Asia that as IS Central loses control over territories which it previously controlled in Iraq and Syria, or losing domination over the heartland which it had created in the Middle East, they are going to look at alternative places to alleviate that pressure. So it puts South Asia in a particularly precarious situation, and we have to be on guard to ensure that that ISIS does not find any sort of foothold in either South Asia or Southeast Asia. But when we talk about finding a foothold, we must also remember that these days organizations like the so-called Islamic State don't need any physical presence anymore. They can also gain a toehold or a foothold by making their virtual presence more active in our parts of the world. And therefore, there is an urgent need for South Asian states to come together and talk about this issue, that if there is an ingress by the so-called Islamic State into South Asia, how we can counter it together.
Right, right. Mr. Munir, do stay with me. Joining me right now live from New Delhi is Mr. Arun Chaudhary. He's a defense expert. Mr. Chaudhary, thanks for speaking to us on WION here. We are talking about the Islamic State and the threat that it poses to the South Asian region. Now, Lucknow encounter, as we've seen, is perhaps the first of its kind where an IS cadre was involved in a live sort of an encounter. How do you see the threat of the Islamic State you know, specifically in India?
As far as your previous speaker was just saying about the ISIS threat in South Asia and Southeast Asia, the threat has become absolutely real. As far as the central command of the ISIS is losing its ground and it's losing out to other forces which are trying to pin them down, they are trying to spread their tentacles as far as action-oriented operations are concerned. Earlier it was recruitment from India, Bangladesh or Pakistan or other places in South Asia and Southeast Asia for the bigger cause which was going on in the Middle East. Today, the lone wolf has become active and has been made to be very active, and he does not use the normal channels of communication. So you will see that when the ISIS or anybody who is leaning towards Islamic terrorism, he wants to talk to another colleague, he either takes the way of the internet or tries to meet him physically, coming from far off places from Karnataka to Lucknow, so that the police forces cannot keep track of them electronically. Now this is a very dangerous trend, and as far as what has happened in Kanpur,
right,
if we agree to what has happened in Kanpur being linked to ISIS, I am sure that such type of action we should be on the lookout.
Right. So from what you're saying, the threat is there. The ISIS not merely now knocking at India's door, but they have in fact managed a successful entry. Taha, coming to you at this point, Pakistan in the recent past has too seen some deadly attacks, and one of them, the name of ISIS, Khorasan, had come forward, just like this module. The name came up in the Lucknow encounter as well. Give us a sense of how the Pakistani establishment is looking at the threat of Islamic State.
Well, we do know that Islamic State is trying to establish its route, whether or not it's them, actual fighters moving here or not, or whether it's just local Taliban rebranding themselves. That is being debated, and that's still not very clear. As far as the authorities are concerned here, we've seen that since 2015, so it's been almost 2 years, that the Islamic State has somewhat shown some presence in Pakistan in different attacks. Local militants have said that it was inspired by Islamic State, or they had help from Islamic State. But whenever the Pakistani Interior Ministry is, for example, spoken to, or when we interview them, the Interior Minister here, they sort of refute the presence of Islamic State, and they say these are just local militants and we're capable of thwarting any such group from coming here. But then when we talk to the intelligence agencies, especially the military intelligence agencies, they basically do talk about the fact that Islamic State is trying to establish themselves here. And we've seen that they've even caught cells in which Islamic State group, some local militants were operating, where Islamic State presence and Islamic State literature was found. And given the fact that Pakistan has a large Sunni extremist sort of presence of Sunni extremist militant groups, and these militant groups are present everywhere, and they have the sort of same focus that the Islamic State has, in the sense that they have the same ideology, they believe in the same things, and they have the same sense of pan-Islamic sort of movement and attacking anything which they consider heretic, which they consider not pure Islam. So in that sense, there is a lot of fertile ground for Islamic State to establish its presence in Pakistan, and we are seeing that presence is growing in the last few months.
Okay, let me get in WION's correspondent Daniele Pagani at this point in time. Daniele, talking specifically about the Islamic State's module of Khorasan. As Taha was also mentioning, the ideology is rather same, because there have been reports earlier that a group of Taliban operatives in both Afghanistan and Pakistan, they pledged their allegiance to IS also and formed the Khorasan Shura. Give us a little more detailed sense, information about what the Khorasan module is all about.
So let me specify that the Khorasan module is not something which is new. As Siddiqui clearly said, it is still under debate whether there are fighters and funds coming directly from the Middle East to Afghanistan to give life to this group or not. So probably it is right now the Islamic State of Khorasan, a sort of an umbrella organization that reunited some local outfits active on the border between both Pakistan and Afghanistan. And probably they united because of dissatisfaction with the line of action of the Pakistani Taliban, or because they received probably some funds directly from the Islamic State. What we know is that some of these groups are clearly recognized by the headquarters of the Islamic State, which is something that has not happened in India, for instance. So when we speak about the Lucknow encounter and the Ujjain train attack as made by the Islamic State of Khorasan, I think this is a little bit of an exaggeration, because there are no direct links yet. Let's remind that there is an investigation undergoing which will maybe give us more results, but right now there are no direct links between a foreign outfit and what happened in India right now.
All right. Mr. Arun Chaudhary, coming to you at this point, there have been so many reports earlier as well which were not perhaps paid heed to, wherein reports came in that, they'd been very targeted advertisements for recruitment in states like Kerala as well. And this is, a few years back, where the Islamic State targeted these youth in specific states, giving out advertisements in the local language as well, asking them to join and fight for the group over there. So the modus operandi has been very distinct and very focused as far as the IS is concerned. Now, how can the security establishments really, fight this sort of a threat that we're seeing that persists protests today?
Basically, the state government, police, the state administration and the central agencies which are well clued up to know about the movements of the ISI should be in one, should work in tandem. As far as Kerala is concerned, Karnataka is concerned, Hyderabad, Andhra Pradesh is concerned, Pune, Maharashtra is concerned, and of course Uttar Pradesh. Now these are the states where the state police should act in tandem with the central intelligence agencies, which are doing a lot of work on the ISIS. And that is why the type of information which is passed on to the state police, they should be asking more questions to the central intelligence agencies and working on them and keeping a surveillance on if they have found out somebody. What happened in Lucknow is what we are getting from the stories which are coming out in the papers and from other sources also, that the name of this gentleman was known to the state police, but somehow or the other the link was broken. But having said that, for further, keeping a surveillance and getting intelligence, both the central agencies and the state police organizations, where there is a spread of such organizations like the ISIs who are working on the social media, should be much more.
All right, sir, do stay with me. Let me go across to Mr. Shafqat Munir, who's still live with us. Sir, we've seen major attack in Dhaka as well that was claimed by ISIS last year. How connected are these attacks then to the subcontinent or South Asia as far as the Islamic State is concerned?
So far, we have not seen any evidence that any attack claim in Bangladesh is linked to any attack in other parts of this region. We have to be very discerning about these claims being made by ISIS. Even in the case of the attack in India, we have to verify that although ISIS Khorasan has claimed this attack, what is the level of the linkage, how true is the claim, how we can verify it, or is it a claim or is it just an endorsement of an attack? These things we have to be very careful. The Islamic State is extremely hungry for publicity and coverage, and it is trying to let the world know that although it is under a debilitating attack in the Middle East, it has the ability to do actions outside. So we have to take these claims, or we have to take these messages coming from the Islamic State carefully, but also with a discerning eye.
All right, Taha, coming to you, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we saw that massive anti-terror operation as well. Pakistan, they're accusing Afghanistan of harboring Islamic State's Khorasan module terrorists over there. So what exactly is Pakistan's plan of action as far as fighting the IS threat is concerned?
Well, we've seen that the Pakistan military has been engaged in these military operations for the last 15 years, and they've conducted over 12 operations in the tribal belt and elsewhere in Pakistan. We're seeing that it's conducting an operation right now also in mainstream Pakistan, like for example in Punjab, in South Punjab. But when we get to know about the information, but the information that is provided to us is provided only through the military. Access to these areas where the military is carrying out these operations is not allowed, independent access. So given that, verification of whether or not the military is actually doing something is hard to ascertain. Given all of that, and we've seen that in the past, whenever the Pakistan military has gone into these areas, what it has managed to do is that it has managed to push the militants out, and that's what we saw with the North Waziristan operation also, which happened in 2014, that it managed to push the militants out, not eliminate them. It managed to destroy the infrastructure, but they went over the other side of the border. Some of them, we got information from local sources, which were the ones that were considered as pro-state, like for example the Afghan Taliban or the Haqqani network. They relocated within Pakistan. And then these very pro-state militants, or the ones that state allows to exist in Pakistan, for example the Afghan militants, or for example the Kashmiri militants or the Sunni extremist militants, these militants then later on provide refuge and provide help to these these other non-state and anti-state militants which are fighting Pakistani state. So basically, the Pakistan military does go after them, but its effectiveness is questionable given the fact that some militants are allowed to still continue to operate, and the other militants they go after. So then, how effective an operation will be, that's questionable.
Absolutely. Daniele, at this point, let me also come to you. You know, we've heard about the latest as far as Islamic State militants are concerned in Iraq and Syria, and, you know, their present position there as well. What then, according to you, makes this part of the world, the Southeast Asia and the South Asia region, perhaps the next target or the next fertile ground for the Islamic State terrorists?
Well, first of all, the large Muslim population. We have Afghanistan, Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. This provides an enormous Muslim belt of hundreds of millions of people who could be, even in a very small part, attracted by the Islamic State ideology. There are local terror outfits active in Afghanistan and Pakistan who are already ready to carry on attacks. They have infrastructures, they have weapons, they have funds, so it's going to be way easier for the Islamic State to penetrate slowly these kind of groups. So this is, I think these are the two assets that the Islamic State look at when they want to implement their ideology and perpetrate their attacks in South Asia.
All right. In fact, Mr. Shafqat Munir, coming to you at this point, we have noticed individuals being targeted in Bangladesh since 2013, and then we've seen a terror attack that targeted mass casualty just last year. As a security analyst, please clarify for us the motives behind these attacks. What is the Bangladesh security agencies? What do they have to say?
We have heard repeatedly from the government, and evidence has also been presented to us about groups in Bangladesh who are involved behind carrying this attack. We have heard about Neo-JMB, we have heard about Ansarul Islam and so on. As a matter of fact, our organization is currently hosting a conference on countering violent extremism. We have to go to the root causes of some of this problem. We have to address issues of youth radicalization. We have to address issues of cyber radicalization. A large majority of our youth are getting radicalized through the internet. So we have to find out how we can counter that. And most importantly, whether it is in the case of countering Bangladesh-based groups such as Neo-JMB, Huji and so on, or it is in the case of India or in Pakistan or other countries, we have to go back to the point of narrative. What we see in South Asia is a lack of a clear narrative on the part of the state and society, countering or providing an alternative narrative to the narrative presented by the extremist organizations. Ultimately, the fight against violent extremism is an ideological and ideational battle. It's a battle of ideas and minds. And whoever wins that battle of ideas and minds will ultimately win this war.
Right. Mr. Arun Chaudhary, coming to you at this point now, in this discussion on the spread of the Islamic State in this particular region, now, when they move out of Iraq and Syria, we understand they have to have a solid base. Now, that do you think is what region could that be? Is it the Afghanistan-Pakistan border? Is their ideology more similar to that of you know, terrorists on the Afghanistan side, or perhaps the Taliban?
No, what I feel is that this so-called spurt of violence and the claims made under the banner of ISIS, whether it was in Pakistan, whether it is in India or in Bangladesh, it is basically, you know, looking out for some sort of a publicity for ISIS, which is dwindling at its base in Iraq and Syria. And that is why there are smaller groups in these countries already present, which needs just to be activated. Whether it was earlier the Indian Mujahideen or whether it was the earlier Lashkar-e-Toiba, the nomenclature actually does not really mean anything. But as far as claiming under the banner of the ISIS is much more fashionable and giving a a backup to an organization which is already losing its the flavor, so to say, which it had around 2-3 years back. Today, not even the people from here are going to go in areas where they want to fight for the ISIS. So the homegrown terrorists is the thing which the Indian security forces have to concentrate. And this has been happening for quite some time now, and the homegrown terrorists are here itself, and we have to look for them. And as I said earlier also, I'll repeat it, that the intelligence agencies of the center and of the state should work in tandem to get around people who are trying to create this.
All right, Mr. Arun Chaudhary, Mr. Shafqat Munir, Daniele Pagani and Taha Siddiqui, thanks all of you for joining us there and sharing your thoughts. So the threat clearly does exist. Now the challenge is bigger in terms of the security forces of these countries, namely India, Pakistan, Bangladesh for now, also Afghanistan to an extent. A challenge for the Trump administration coming in there to weed out, to root out these terrorist elements from this area. Remember those 3 incidents on your screen, the Pakistan Shrine suicide bombing that left dozens of people killed, then the last year's Dhaka cafe attack in July. A lot of foreigners were targeted in that attack. And more recently, this Tuesday in Madhya Pradesh, the train attack, an ID blast that injured about 10 people, all those connected to the Islamic State's Khorasan module, according to investigative agencies over there. So clearly a present imminent danger for this particular region of South Asia to tackle the terrorist threat posed by Islamic State. All right, with that, we're going to be taking a very short break. More news and updates follow in just a bit. Don't go anywhere.